Today on the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'm back from a mini hiatus and telling you all the bourbon and whiskey news you missed, including a new Old Fitzgerald release from Heaven Hill, a Cask Strength High West, and the highs and lows of Irish whiskey through 2025. Plus, I have a very special bite-sized review of Van Winkle Special Reserve Lot B Bourbon Whiskey. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of January 15th, 2026. Happy Thursday. Thank you all so much for allowing me a couple weeks off to travel for the holidays, do a little bit of a reset, and now I am very much back in action with the Bourbon Bytes Podcast, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. If you're new here, hi, welcome. This is kind of the return from a mid-season break. I didn't consider it a full end of the second season just because I felt like I still had quite a bit more content to do before we wrapped up what I like to call a season. But I did take a little break, so I appreciate those of you that stuck with me through it. I have a very special bite-sized review sent in to me from one of my viewers that we're going to do later on the podcast. But we do have some whiskey news to talk about because it's been a few weeks, so there's been a lot happening out there. Not necessarily a lot in terms of new releases, but there's just been a lot going on in the world in general. So let's get into it. I think one of the first announcements I have is one of the biggest distilleries, one of my favorite distilleries, Heaven Hill, has announced their Bottle & Bond Old Fitzgerald bourbon for fall 2025. A little bit of a late announcement. It came out towards the middle of December. This is going to be an 11-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, and it's going to be released at a MSRP of $160. This is going to be a relatively old one. You know, we've been seeing some younger 9-10-year-old releases in the past couple of these Old Fits, so I'm glad to see an at least 11-year-old age statement. Now, as with all these Old Fitzgerald decanters, this one comes in at 100 proof, bottled in bond, and they say this one is accompanied by notes of bourbon sweetness, leather, oak, and baking spices, as well as plums, peaches, and figs. Sounds like all my kind of favorite notes. I've always been a fan of this mash bill. I most recently had a chance to try it with the bottled in bond 7-year Old Fitzgerald that is more of a shelf-stable, regular release that actually made my top 10 whiskeys of the year, by the way. Newest published video on the channel, other than the live streams. I did a countdown of my top 10 whiskeys of 2025. If you missed it, go check it out, youtube.com/bourbonbytes. You will see that Old Fitz 7-year on that list, along with quite a few other new American whiskeys that came out last year, or I tried for the first time last year. So check that out. Make sure to subscribe. I go live every Thursday evening. And yeah, if you're looking for something new to subscribe to in the new year, check out Bourbon Bytes on YouTube. Well, since we're talking about new releases, there's another one from one of my favorite craft rye distilleries, High West. They are actually releasing a cask strength release of their bourbon. So they haven't actually done this in the past. They've done some individual single barrels, but they are having a new addition to the lineup called Cask Strength Bourbon. It started January 12th, so just a few days ago, and the retail price on it is about $70. Now, they actually give us a little more detail than I thought we were going to see about this release. They say that this is a small batch bourbon that is a blend of 5 different straight bourbon whiskeys, aged between 6 years and 20 years old, sourced from distilleries in Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee. So the only one on there that kind of worries me is the Tennessee. I don't know where they're sourcing from in Tennessee. There's a chance it might have that George Dickel kind of note that some of those releases do. Not that I'm totally opposed to George Dickel. It's just sometimes when those are in a blend, it tends to overwhelm it. That's how I felt about certain Bardstown Bourbon Company releases in the past. So that makes me a little hesitant, but for a price tag of $70, having up to a 20-year-old bourbon in that blend does excite me. So this is going to be one that I'm going to keep an eye out. It's going to be limited quantities, but this is supposed to go nationwide starting this month. And I am pretty excited. Like I said, High West is known for their rye whiskey. I think they excel at rye whiskey. So their bourbon, I'm a little bit more iffy about, but at cask strength with a pretty darn nice range of ages in the bottle, I would definitely give it a try for $70. So again, as with the Heaven Hill, I will pick it up if I see it and give it a review for you guys. So stay tuned. There's a lot of new whiskeys coming out this year that I want a chance to try. I tried tons last year, but 2026, I think, at least based on the rumors I've been hearing, there's going to be some good releases coming out this year. So I got my eyes peeled, and make sure to have your ears peeled or perked or whatever you do. Listen, just listen in. Well, since we were branching out from Kentucky bourbon, there is another craft distillery that I know and love, Frey Ranch Distillery out of Nevada. They are releasing a 100% barley whiskey. This one's going to come in at 4 years and 8 months old and bottled at 110 proof. Relatively young for a barley whiskey. I am curious to try it. I do love Frey Ranch. I think I'm more drawn to their rye whiskeys more so than, I guess, their bourbon. But I mean, I've not tried 100% barley whiskey from them, so I'd be curious to see how it does. They say it will definitely appeal to bourbon lovers, but anyone interested in trying something new in the world of American whiskey should give this a try as well. So it seems like maybe they're going for a bourbon lover's palate, which I too tend to enjoy. They say it is made from 2-row unmalted barley. So that's the key thing. It's made from unmalted barley. So it's going to be quite a bit different from some traditional, malted barley things like Scotch. So I'm excited to check it out. A little hesitant, but I think, Frey Ranch tends to do things that are aged very well and high quality. They said this is going to be a limited quantity release available at their online shop as part of a bundle. So unfortunately, you do have to buy this as a bundle. They're going to do a Whiskey Lovers 2-pack bundle for $99 that includes this 100% barley whiskey plus their malted 4-grain bourbon. Or you can do a bourbon and barley 2-pack for the same price, where you can get their 4-grain bourbon plus the 100% barley whiskey. So that's one that I would definitely want to either try before I buy or wait till I see some reviews on it. But it is interesting to see a new release from them. I'll give them that. And again, Frey Ranch continues to be one of my favorite craft distilleries. So we'll see. We'll see how I guess this counts as an American single malt, even though it is unmalted. Would it be a single malt? Wait, that's confusing. Okay, maybe I'm very ignorant. It would be a single grain from the barley, but since it's not a malted barley, is it a single malt? I don't know. You guys let me know. Leave a comment or shoot me a message on Discord if this would count as a single malt. All right, well, one more new release. This one actually was announced back in November, but it's been a minute since I've done the podcast, so I'm going to call it out as well. Wyoming Whiskey is releasing their 5th National Parks expression. They've been doing this for the past few years now, and this year is a tribute to the Tetons. So they release a whiskey based on different national parks across the U.S. In the past, they've done Yellowstone and Acadia National Park, and actually the Grand Tetons they featured in the past. So this is a second partnership with the Grand Teton National Park Foundation, and it is supposed to be a bourbon that furthers the foundation's ongoing efforts to preserve the park's natural resources. That seems to be a big focus of what Wyoming Whiskey has been doing, and they say the cornerstone of our commitment is the support of our national parks. Over the last 4 years, we have made donations to Yellowstone Forever, the Grand Teton National Park Foundation, and Friends of Acadia, the philanthropic partners of each park. With National Park number 5, we feature Grand Teton with a historic image by Thomas Moran titled The Three Tetons. This straight bourbon whiskey is 5 years old, bottled at 96 proof, and I must say, hitting all the right notes with the flavor profile. Now, this is coming to us from the co-founder of Wyoming Whiskey, David DeFazio. But this is the first time I'm hearing of this national park series. As someone that is a huge supporter of our national parks across the nation, my goal is to go to as many of them as possible. I love this cause. I love seeing brands giving back to, not just their local communities, but these great treasures we have across the U.S., which are our national parks, or even more local state parks and county parks. All of this is really important to me. So when I see a whiskey that's supporting a cause I care about, it makes me just a little more interested in the whiskey. Retail on this is going to be about $75, and it's going to be available across Wyoming, as well as online for national delivery at wyomingwhiskey.com starting last month. $5 from every bottle is going to be donated to the Grand Teton National Park Foundation, up to $50,000. So I think it's a significant part for a $75 bottle, $5 of it. A lot of that goes into the overhead costs of making whiskey, especially craft whiskey. So I don't know. I think it is a great cause, and I can't wait to give it a try, whether it's on a live stream or picking up a bottle locally. So let me know if you tried it. Let me know how it is, and let me know if I should reach out. All right, well, last topic I kind of just want to mention because it's relevant to the world of whiskey internationally. So I saw two articles come out, and it's funny because they almost, if you glance over them, they're going to look like they contradict each other. So there's an article put out in December of 2025 how Irish whiskey is booming. People are more excited than ever for Irish whiskey. They're saying their numbers of visitors are up nationwide across Ireland. Their exports rose 13% in value last year, and their exports by volume were up 3.6%. Not just that, but the number of tourists visiting Ireland has returned to more than 1 million visitors per year to explore their whiskey distilleries. Now, this data is based on the first 6 months of 2025. Now, unfortunately, all these numbers are coming out ahead of when the U.S. introduced tariffs on whiskey internationally, so that probably does have some effect. So these numbers are just based on up to June 2025. But what's interesting is another article came out just less than a month later, and it's about Teeling specifically. Teeling, by the way, is one of my favorite Irish whiskey brands. I buy their standard small batch just for cocktails, and of course their higher end stuff does great on its own. But I saw this article pop up on the spirits business in January 6th, actually, and they say Teeling's profits free fall 91% in 2025. So their post-tax profits plummeted by 91%, so falling from 3.4 million euros in 2024 to 295,000 euros for 2025. So that's a drastic drop in profits. So it kind of counteracts what we were just saying about Irish whiskey being, kind of hitting its stride and catching on, especially in the US and the UK. They said that the Irish whiskey sector endured a challenging period during the financial year of 2025, caused in large part to growing input and labor costs as well as overstocking issues, which was also exacerbated by trade restrictions. Again, these numbers were before the imposed 15% tariff on Irish whiskey in the U.S., so that isn't taken into account here. This is just a general update from year over year. But they did say that their sales didn't just fall in the U.S., but across their markets. They also saw sales shrinking in Europe as well as other regions that they were exporting to. They do say that they are confident in the future, though. They say that their visitor center just welcomed their 1 millionth visitor to the distillery in May of 2025, so they seem to have a hopeful outlook on it. But man, 91% down in their profits. That's concerning. I mean, maybe it could mean that they're just investing, they're expanding, they're making more whiskey. I don't know, but that's a pretty massive number. I hope the best for Teeling. Like I said, they're one of my favorite Irish whiskey distilleries. So hopefully they can come back from this and continue producing the amazing whiskey that I know them for. So curious to hear what you guys think about that. I know some of their older stocks is still from Cooley, like the 13 year that I have is a Cooley distillate, but they are making their own whiskey now. So maybe they're investing in their future, or hopefully they can build back up from this shortcoming of 2025. Trust me, that's what we're all hoping for in 2026, right? Like recover from the mistakes of last year. All right, well, that does it for our news segment of the podcast. I think it's about time we get into a very exciting bite-sized review. All right. Well, since I am making a big return to the podcast after a little break, I thought I would pour something special for today's bite-sized review. If you saw the title of this podcast and the thumbnail, you already know what this is. But this is Pappy Van Winkle Special Reserve 12-year-old Lot B. So this is a bourbon I've never tried, and I want to give a huge shout out to Byte Club member Tony Bag of Donuts, who provided this sample as a part of a Christmas gift. So thank you again for this, Tony. I've already texted him and thanked him and made sure I was allowed to review this and not save it for a special group pour or something like that. So really, really excited to finally try this. I have only tried Pappy 15 and the Van Winkle Rye from the Pappy lineup. So even though this one isn't technically labeled as a Pappy, it is a Van Winkle Reserve. So I'm really, really excited. I've been prepping my palate with a pour of Weller 12, which I've reviewed previously on the podcast. It's actually not one of my favorite Weller releases. Check out that podcast to find out why. But I've kind of set my palate with this because spec-wise, this is pretty darn close. So of course, Weller 12 is 12 years old and 90 proof, Well, Van Winkle Special Reserve is also 12 years old and also 90.4 proof. So close enough. Now, the one I'm trying right now is the 2023 release. I'm not sure how it compares to the other ones, but I think being lucky enough to try this is, it doesn't matter what year it is, it's going to be a special pour. Now, retail on Van Winkle Special Reserve is $150. If you ever see it for that, buy it for me and send me all of it. Of course, this on the secondary market goes for much, much more than that. I did a quick little Google search to see what it's going for now. It looks to be around 1,000 on secondary. I saw some listings closer to 500, but there's a lot of scummy people out there. So I'm just going to say around $1,000 secondary. But either way, we're going to be reviewing it as if it's a $150 whiskey. And considering that Weller 12 retail is around $50, we're going to see if this Lot B is worth the premium over Weller 12. Now, this isn't going to be a full comparison. I'm not going to re-review the Weller 12, but I did want to have it on my palate before I went into this review, just to make sure I was familiar with what to expect from a 12-year-old wheated bourbon from Buffalo Trace. By the way, a little bit of info about this release, because I honestly didn't know too much. I'd heard the name. I'd always seen it referred to as kind of the lesser of the Van Winkle lineup. I think that's just inherent from the fact that it's called Lot B, assuming there's a Lot A somewhere that's the premium product. I don't know if that's the case. I think this is just a younger version of what they would consider to be, like a Pappy 15. This might just not be at that age yet, but it's at a point where they are ready to release it. Of course, Old Rip Van Winkle comes in at 10 years, so this kind of sits perfectly in the middle of that one and the Pappy 15. So I think that's more of the reason. It's just not as old as Pappy 15, not that it's like a lesser stock, but we'll find out. Now, as with other Buffalo Trace wheated bourbons, we don't know the mash bill. There's rumors that it's around 20% wheat and then 76% corn, with the rest being malted barley. But we don't know a mash bill, unfortunately, but we do know it is their wheated mash bill. Let's go ahead and give the Van Winkle Special Reserve a nose. Oh, wow, that's much more off of the nose than I thought I would get, especially compared to the Weller 12. It's a similar nose, but the Weller 12, I had to dive in really deep into the glass to be able to get some nosing notes. The Van Winkle Reserve is definitely working its way out of the glass much, much easier. The nose is just really, really intense, and I love it. And there's a lot of oak, and it smells like a really nicely balanced between the sweetness and the lightness of the wheated bourbon and the oak backbone that it gives it. It definitely has a little bit of like a brightness, almost like a green tea. I get black tea on a lot of bourbons, but this is brighter. It feels more, I guess, earthy. So it's a little bit like a matcha or a green tea. I mean, on nose alone, you can tell that this is a special bourbon. It smells so good, I just want to give it a taste. So don't mind if I do. Cheers, y'all. Mmm. Oh, wow. Yeah. Very different from that Weller 12. I mean, flavor-wise, they're not even comparable. I mean, side by side, Weller 12 almost feels like a watered-down version of this, even though they're very similar proof. Yeah, I think we're moving out of the Weller 12 territory and moving into the Pappy territory, because this is a fantastic first sip. Wow, that impressed me way more than I thought it was. I guess I just thought it would kind of be just a slightly better Weller 12, but that first sip just tells me that that opinion is completely wrong. This has so much going for it that I think that the Weller 12 just doesn't hold up to in comparison. This is a very, very well-aged bourbon. I mean, 12 years old and bourbon is relatively old these days, and you can taste every single year that went into that. I mean, this oak is surrounding this kind of sweet, soft, approachable flavor profile, but it's giving it a very robust, just kind of effervescence of that oak. It really highlights what meticulous aging can do for a bourbon. I assume this is probably some of their best picks they had at the age. There's almost a little bit of like a mulled wine kind of flavor going as well. It's kind of in the background of that oak, but there's a little bit of like a cinnamon, maybe a little bit of like apple. I can't tell if it's like an apple brandy kind of note or a just a tart apple, but there's definitely some apple and cinnamon going on there. Almost like apple cinnamon oatmeal, if you want to compare it to something. I mean, The number one thing I can say about this bourbon is it's incredibly balanced. It doesn't get spiky in any direction, which sometimes I look for those spikes. I like the really hard hitting or like the nutty ones. This one doesn't really hit that. It's very, like I said, it's surrounded by that oak that kind of mellows everything out. With it being a wheated bourbon, that makes sense as well. It's not spicy like a rye. I mean, this is a very approachable bourbon, which sounds crazy because we're talking about a $150 bourbon here with a much higher secondary rate. But really, flavor-wise, I mean, this is what I expect a lot of people to find as the perfect bourbon, and I find it hard to fault in terms of flavor, of course, not availability. Finish-wise, I would say it's medium to long. It's not overstaying its welcome, and you wouldn't expect a 90.4 proof bourbon to do that, but it does linger with that oak a bit on the back end. The sweetness dissipates quicker than the oak, so you're kind of just left with like a dry oak on the finish, which I actually really enjoy. That's a flavor profile that I seek out on a lot of bourbons, and you can't really find it that often without going 12 plus years old, because otherwise you're going to get more of a bitter, tannic, maybe a little bit younger oak. This one is just really mellow and very enjoyable. I don't want to even say this is like a better version of Weller 12. This is to me, a very different product. This is a premium bourbon. This drinks like the premium that it is. If you could find it for $150, hands down, recommend all time and get it every single time you see it. But of course, we know that's not the case here with this. But you know what? When it comes to my score, I'm going to rate it based on price that it's at. And, I do consider availability, which I know a lot of people are going to say like, oh, it's not available, that your score might seem a bit high because of that. But I'm just going to base this on the fact that I'll probably not have a chance to try it again without amazing friends like Tony. So I'm going to say all things considered, nose, price, flavor. Unfortunately, I throw availability in there as well, which is going to be the only thing that hinders this score because I think it absolutely justifies the $150 price. Would I pay much more than that? Maybe because, it's like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. But if this was just a shelf bottle for $150, I would not hesitate to pick it up. So all that being said, I'm going to give Van Winkle Special Reserve 12-year-old bourbon, Lot B, a score of 9 out of 10. Listen, I have to dock at 1 point for availability. I think that's the only thing holding this whiskey about from being a perfect score. And again, this isn't in comparison to, Pappy 15, 2023. This is on its own. If I was doing a comparison and a ranking, that would maybe affect score, but I like reviewing whiskeys based on just by themselves. So while I did enjoy comparing this to the Weller 12, I think on its own, this sits at a solid 9 out of 10. It's delicious. Retail's a great price. I just think the only thing holding it back is availability and scarcity, which I'm hoping that Buffalo Trace works on in the near future. We know they are expanding their warehouses significantly. Their supply may ultimately catch up with the demand. We'll see what happens. It's a new year, right? We'll see what happens for Buffalo Trace. But for this podcast, I want to say thank you again for everyone that was excited for me to come back. I enjoyed the couple of weeks off, and I'm excited to get back to making great content. So if you want to follow me, you can find me on whatever platform you get your podcast. You can also go to bourbonbytes.com and listen there. Make sure to share it with your friends. Hey, you're looking for something new to listen to in the new year? Well, here's a cool bourbon podcast that does whiskey reviews and news in under 30 minutes, usually. I try to aim for that. All right, well, thank you guys for listening. Cheers, and I'll talk to you guys next episode. Bye.